You're listening to the Zealous Podcast with Rocky Snyder. This week, we've got Joey Wolfe, a former baseball player with the Toronto Blue Jays organization. He's now setting his sights on youth sports conditioning, and in particular, baseball. I hope you enjoy the episode. Early in your career, you pursued baseball. Obviously, you've been doing it all your life. You made it to professional ball, and you got a tremendous amount of experience with the farm teams, the minors, and then had a change of course in your life, and that brought you into strength conditioning. So, give me a little idea of what it was like in the minors and transitioning into the world of strength conditioning.
Yeah, so I played baseball for 20 years. The last 3 of those years were professionally in the Blue Jays minor league system. So that was all I ever thought about was trying to play professional baseball. And so when that ended, it ended abruptly. I ended up retiring on Memorial Day weekend in 2005. The night before that, when I went to sleep, I wasn't thinking, hey, I'm going to retire from something I've been doing for 20 years. It was kind of things had kind of come to a head, and I had enough. And so when I got done, I never really thought about what am I going to do with my life? And so I had some time to think about that on the drive home. My best friend flew out from Oregon, and we drove back together. And I think I got back on a Saturday morning or something like that. And my family at the time owned a business over in San Jose. They were a big contract manufacturer. They built semiconductor equipment. And my dad's like, hey, I want you at work on Monday. So I said, okay. And so I never really took the time to process, knowing what I know now, would have probably taken a month off, maybe traveled, done something, and eventually landed on what you're talking about, strength and conditioning. But it didn't actually happen that way. So I went to go work for my dad's business for about 1.5 years. And during that time, my oldest brother, Vince, got diagnosed with grade 4 glioblastoma. It's the strongest form of brain cancer. And he died less than a year later. He died on May 5th, 2007. So that kind of spun me out pretty good in terms of, because at the time I was driving, over to San Jose every day, which is about 45 minutes, depending on traffic. Sometimes it could be 1.5 hours driving. I was very unsatisfied with what I was doing. It was nothing like I felt like when I was playing baseball. I never questioned what I was doing. I knew I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I loved it. And I missed that part of it. And then when Vince died, he was only 30 when he passed away. It was like, life is way too short to be living this life. So that's when I decided, I always kind of wanted to get into training. I always kind of dreamt about opening up my own training facility, but I had no experience other than the practical experience as an athlete, but I never trained anyone. So I ended up working at Google. They offered me a job working the front desk, gave me opportunities to study. And then shortly after that's when I met you. So that was, I guess, that was Christmas Eve of 2009. I came in and met you. And
2009? Is it been that long?
Yeah, it was 2009.
12 years.
And you took me through a workout. It was a class, and I was the only one that showed up because it was Christmas Eve. And I remember thinking, this guy is good at what he does, and I can learn a lot here. And so and again, the goal was always to bring the business over to Santa Cruz and not make that commute anymore, because I've done it for years. And so I just kind of slowly started learning, and I started learning a lot when I was working with you. I'm just getting around a lot of good people, really started educating myself early on in my career. It's Exos now, as you know, but athletes performance, when I was playing baseball, I really loved what Mark Verstegen was doing. And he'd written a couple books, and I read them. And so I had an opportunity to do some of their mentorships. And so I just kind of started devouring as much information from them as I could. And slowly started kind of building a clientele, specifically in the baseball. That was obviously my niche. It was such a big part of my life. And so I started training a lot of baseball players, both high school, a couple pros, some college guys, and then eventually kind of have grown into what we're doing now. So I guess going back to your original question about baseball and what baseball taught me, this is the kind of the one thing in what I feel like differentiates us from others. I'm not saying others don't do this, but it's something that, because I've reflected on this a lot. Like for me, when baseball ended the way it did, in some ways, how I was framing it was, well, that was a waste of time. I spent all this time and energy on trying to, hone my skills and develop this craft, master this craft. And now I can't, it's not like surfing or tennis or golf where you can go do it. You can still go do it when you're 60. I don't play in a men's league. I can't utilize my skills anymore as a player. But really what baseball taught me was, what it meant to be a good teammate, what it meant to work really hard on days that you didn't want to, grit, all of the things that all sports teach you if you allow it to. And so that was kind of how I reframed everything. And so now, whether it's we're training kids in the gym or we're working with them on the baseball field, that is really the message. Is like, look, guys, like, and not to be negative about it, but most of you guys aren't going to play in college, and very few of you will play in the major league. So, and even if you're Derek Jeter, this thing's going to end at some point, right? So you really got to use the game and take all of it, everything you can from it. Don't let the game use you. And I felt like for the first 2 or 3 years when I was retired, I was a bit salty about it just because I didn't get to the low. I never made it to the major leagues. That ultimately was the goal. And so for us, what we've tried to do is we've tried to combine the skills side of things. So we have lessons that we do. I was a catcher, so I'm doing catching lessons. Kevin Eichhorn, who's the director of our baseball operations, he was a minor league pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. And so he worked the pitchers. We both hitting. We have a few other coaches on our staff that do the infield. So we can speak at a pretty high level on the technical side of the game. But in addition to that, what we started doing about 4 or 5 years ago is we started creating our own travel ball teams. There's a lot of dads in town or some teams over the hill. And it was funny. Originally, I started doing it just to kind of trick the kids into training because I couldn't get the kids just. It's because kids wouldn't come in and train. They didn't want to. As training can be challenging, and they didn't want to do it, but they were all playing travel ball. I was like, well, if we start, I can run a travel ball team. I've never been a manager, but I'm sure I can do this. So we started a team, and then we made the training a part of the program. And so now they start getting the training and then they start feeling like, I'm getting stronger. I'm hitting the ball further. I'm actually becoming a better player. So we kind of went backwards because the first 2 or 3 years we were open, we weren't doing travel ball. So now we're doing the skills side of the skill development. We're doing, we're doing the travel team. So we're going to see these kids compete. Because one of the challenging things for me as an instructor was you're doing these lessons and then you don't really know how it plays out because you're not at their games watching them perform. And so, you hope for the best, but you don't really know. And, baseball is such a heady game that you can look physically like really good in a cage, but oftentimes kids can't translate that into a game situation. So now we're getting the best of both worlds. We're getting kids, we're getting them instruction, we're seeing how it translates. And if it's not translating, then we can go back to the drawing board and kind of take a look and see what's going on. And then now they're also getting that gym setting where they're getting physically bigger, stronger, faster. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we brought a guy on, his name's Jake Angelo, and he has a master's degree. And he's really into sports psychology. And he talks a lot about positive mental attitude, PMA. He talks about it all the time. And the kids in our program have really bought into it. So now they're getting skill acquisition, they're getting the strength and conditioning, and then they're getting this mental component that Ange is providing too. So we're trying to get all of it happening in-house because a lot of these programs, what they'll do is they'll go recruit the best players from all over Northern California. I played on a team at the time it was called NorCal Angels. Now it's just called NorCal. And Rob Bruner's a great guy. He runs a really good program. CC Sabathia and a bunch of other guys played on this team. But I never felt like I was part of a team. It was like guys would come in for the weekend. I wouldn't play because they were better than me. And so they would play. And then those guys would move on to college. I eventually went on to college too. But it never felt like I was developing as a player, as a teammate, all the things, like I said, that I felt baseball taught me. And so I want to kind of build something different. I want to build something where we're building kids in-house and we're developing them. And I've been doing this long enough now where we had kids have come in since they were 10 and now they've graduated high school and now playing in college. And that's pretty special to me, is taking a kid that, had he not met any of our coaching staff at Paradigm, it's unlikely that he'd be playing in college. So to have that kind of impact on kids in the community is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and you don't just rely on in-house education information with the staff that you have and your own experience. I know for a fact you have reached out to organizations and individuals like the PRI, the guys from PRI. You hired them to come in, teach courses at your facility, and Tom House, who's been on this show previously. He's the NFL quarterback coach or throwing coach for Tom Brady, as well as the newly retired Drew Brees and about 17 other NFL quarterbacks. That's what one of those things that
that I'm so proud of you for doing is relying on the fact that there's more information out there, and I want to bring it to them. So now that COVID hopefully is lifting, or during even COVID, have you continued to do that? I'm just curious. I'm not sure if you have or not.
Yeah, that's funny, the timing of that. Yeah, I actually emailed Lauren from Perform Better yesterday to ask her what's going on with their summits this summer, if they're going to continue to do them. She said they're done with the 1 days, but they'll be doing the 3 days. So,
Yes.
that as you know, you're a speaker on the summits. But yeah, no, 100%. And we were just talking before this call started. As a business owner in this industry, it can be tough for multiple reasons. But I think one of them is, if people are going to get in this profession and they're going to use it as a career, or stay in it as a career, they're not doing it for the money. Most of them aren't. I mean, there's very few people that are making, six figures doing what we do. And so you have to find somebody that is passionate about it and wants to learn. And so providing those opportunities for our staff, I think, is really important, not only for their professional development, but also their personal development. And I know for me, when I started training with you, like, I didn't know anything, and I knew I didn't know anything. And I never, like, my biggest fear was like hurting a client. Like, I never wanted to hurt a client, just because I didn't know what I was doing. So early on in my career, I was devouring, like I said, I was devouring as much information as I could, trying to process it as best I could. But I think that for me, that's been a big part of it since the beginning. Is I'm constantly trying to learn and evolve. And I think that's why you were such a good mentor to me, is because you've been, when we met, I think you've been in the industry for like 20 plus years, and you were still constantly evolving and stuff like that. So having that guidance from you and others, I think, was paramount. So yeah, I still am trying to do it. It is challenging, but I guess the one good thing about COVID, because there is some silver lining, is things like what we're doing now. Everything is virtual, so you can still hop on and you can do something virtually. We had a call with our coaches about 6 months back with Brendan Rearick. Do you know Brendan at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he was great. He'd just written his book, and I had my staff read it, and we kind of took our takeaways from it, asked him questions, and he was really great with his time, and it's awesome just to answer questions. So we still do it. I mean, if to be totally honest, it definitely took a backseat to just trying to stay in business. Like the last 20 months have been really challenging for everyone in our industry. But as I'd say around June, July, it was kind of like, because what we got away from was like leads to trials and trials to memberships. Like our whole sales process and marketing process just went kaput when everything went down. And as things started to come back, it was like, okay, we need to kind of get back to what we were doing beforehand. Continuing education is definitely one of those things.
Right on. Yeah. And when it comes to Perform Better, there will be the live training summits, with one exception. Long Beach is not on the calendar. That we'll do Orlando, Florida. We're going to do Providence, Rhode Island, and Chicago. So those will be the 3 venues that are happening this year, and
Okay.
I'm sure they're going to be successful. I mean, it's always just a huge amount of information just to draw from, and I loved it when we would go down there as a team and so on down to Long Beach, and we would divide and conquer. Okay, what did you get from this presenter? I went to this one. Here's what he was talking about. Here's what she was doing in the hands-on, and it was phenomenal. So for anybody that hasn't been to the training summits, you do yourself a favor and actually go in person and really soak up as much knowledge and experience as you can. So with Paradigm, when did you start this? It's been 8 years now?
Yeah, it'll be 8 in June, so 2014.
2014, fantastic. And you've got about a 5,200 square foot facility, complete with a batting cage, as well as a training facility. And it's top notch. I mean, this is a very professional outfit that you've put together. And one thing I'm curious, Joey, and it's something that I don't know if we've really talked about, but how much harder it is for you in regards to your clientele. If you're seeking youth baseball, the kids are only going to be young for so long. And there's seasons, and there's so many other elements that come into play with your client base that presents, I think, twice as much work from a business perspective than just training general population. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Are you thinking in the sense of the actual training aspect, or are you thinking like retaining clientele, or all the above?
Now, it's more about retaining clientele. I mean, you're constantly having to generate leads more so than say, let's just take somebody that is focused on the elderly population. Now, granted, there's a ceiling there that they're going to reach eventually, but it's going to be probably more years than your average player. Granted, you just said you had a 10-year-old that are now in college ranks, so you've had them for 7 to 10 years or so, and they probably come back during their seasons. But honestly, your clients are, how many years are they going to stay with you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, I mean, if you take an average general population client, like to retain a client for like 3+ years, I'd say that's probably higher than average for us. And so for us, again, that's kind of why the travel ball's been good. It's almost like a lead generator from the strength and conditioning side, because we basically work with 12 all the way to 18U, and so every year we're getting a new batch of kids coming in again, and it's only a small percentage of those kids are going to last the 7 to 8 years. Those are the ones that are really special, right? Those are the ones that want to come in and work and do it. So I guess I'd say our travel ball program is a bit of a lead generator. It's been easier for us to build a brand in the community around the baseball. I think because kids are wearing our shirts, adults wear our shirts around town, and that's not something I thought about early on. I think when I first started, because of my background as a player and someone who really likes strength and conditioning and training, I just kind of looked at it all as the same thing. But as I've done this over time, it's like, these are definitely two different businesses, and I've kind of muddied the waters having them. But in some ways, when it's working well, it's such a beautiful thing to see the kids and the parents kind of training in the same facility. But I would say, to answer your question, that the travel ball is kind of the lead generator, and I feel like we built a name for ourselves in the baseball industry. So people are coming, like we have clients coming up from San Jose and Monterey. It's like Eric, when I was visiting Cressy in 2011, it was like one of those aha moments. There was a kid, he'd flown all the way out there from Indiana. And, I don't know if you went to Eric's original facility in Hudson, Massachusetts, but I couldn't find the place and I had the address. I was like looking for it. And it's like, if you get really good at what you do, people will come find you. And that was kind of, and I'm not even comparing myself to Eric. Eric is still he's the best in the industry as far as I'm concerned at training baseball players. But kids are coming from San Jose to come train with us. So I honestly, I feel like it's easier for us to get our baseball clientele training with us than it is for the general population. And that's really shifted heavily through the pandemic. And I've kind of asked myself, like, why is that? And I think for us, I think the restrictions were clear. It was very black and white, what we could and couldn't do. And with the baseball, we weren't technically like a gym, and we had these classes going outside, and parents wanted to get their kids out of the house to get them doing something. And we weren't competing with basketball or football or soccer because those weren't going on either. And so that really kind of expedited, I think inevitably what was going to happen. One of my mentors told me a couple of weeks ago at dinner, he said his perception of the pandemic is that what it really is, it just expedited the inevitable. And so a couple of examples he gave was, like live, instead of going to the movie theater, we're now live streaming our movies, virtual meetings like we're doing right now. Like, things were going this way, but it didn't happen. Once the pandemic hit, it just everything expedited. And I look at our business when you sound like that's probably what was going to happen with our business. Now, I don't know that our business, our fitness business, was headed down the way it's gone with the pandemic, but definitely the baseball things were kind of trending in that way slowly before the pandemic. So, yeah.
Well, and it also, I mean, it helps. Your location is surrounded by baseball fields, so it's like you couldn't have plucked yourself down into a spot that is more suitable, because the people that come by there are heading toward the field itself. But I get
Right.
what you're saying. I totally agree too. I think as parents, we needed places that were safe for our kids to go and explore. That and you provided that. I'm curious. We get a lot of the listening audience are male trainers. A lot of them looking to get into youth sports conditioning. I've had several guests on this past year that have been focusing on just that. And I think you'll agree that even though you focus on baseball, there's other sports that you encourage your athletes to pursue, so that the wear and tear on their bodies are minimized compared to the year-round athlete. Like,
Right.
how do you have that conversation with the parents? Like, do you have like parent night or information night where you sit down with the family and go, hey, look, I know he loves playing baseball, she loves playing baseball, but for the longevity of their sport and their participation, it's essential that this, and this happen.
Yeah, no, we do have those conversations, and we set up our season in a way that we're not playing. The kids aren't playing year round, and we make it very clear. I mean, we have an entire player's handbook and a parent's handbook, so we have a meeting before the season start. We go through it, and I do think we do explain them that they need to be doing multiple sports. I have two boys myself, a 7 and a 9-year-old, who aren't great baseball players yet, but they're playing flag football, they're playing soccer, they're playing basketball. So I think all we can do is provide the information. If a parent really actually seems like they care what I say and they're interested, Eric's written some great articles on this. I'll send it to them and say, hey, this is, and I agree with what Eric's saying, and he gives some specific examples as to why. But at the end of the day, man, you can lead a horse to water. I think some of these parents, they just don't. It's like, my Jimmy loves playing baseball. It's like, okay, well, I think you're doing him a disservice by having him play, 350 days, out of the year when he's 10 years old. And sometimes what will happen too is we'll get baseball players when they're in high school. And I'll never say this to be mean, but you can almost tell, like, hey, did you play other sports when you were a kid? And they're like, nope, just baseball. And it's like, yeah, I can tell that. Like, their multi-directional skills aren't very good. Like, they can put a bat to the ball, but there's certain things they don't do well. And I think that it's really hard for kids to develop. Like, we work with a lot of pro baseball players in here, and pretty much all of them played multiple sports not just like when they were younger, but through high school. But I do think that for some kids like myself, like, I'm not an overly athletic person. You see, I'm not very big. I'm 5'8". I was 170 pounds when I graduated high school. I played a lot of sports till I was, through junior high. But then once I got to high school, I did specialize in baseball. And I wasn't a pitcher, so I'll make that clear. But I feel like for some kids that aren't overly athletic and don't have like these physical statures, sometimes I think it maybe kind of that high school time might be a good time to start maybe specializing in a sport. And I don't hear a lot of guys saying this or gals talking about this, but I firmly believe that if I would have played basketball or football in high school, that my chances of playing college out of high school would not have been very high. So that's just my opinion on it. But I think up until 14, 15 years old, I think kids should be playing all different types of sports.
And so, not to put you into a hot seat in any way, but I'm curious about your strength conditioning program with those that are pre-adolescent, the 10 to, let's say, 10 to 13-year-old boys, are part of your conditioning programs game-based, where it's not like baseball so much as it is ultimate frisbee or soccer or some other kind of skill transfer games in a way?
Yes, we do all of that. And a lot of that, especially for the younger kids, is just to keep them engaged, right? Like, it's just like anything else. You want to keep kids engaged, you create a game or you create competition. And so we'll do the hinge and the knee dominant and the hip dominant, the pulling and the pushing, all the strength and conditioning stuff. But we definitely leave time towards the end or in the middle or as a starter to have a game where they're playing tag or they're catching a football. They're doing whatever it is, just to kind of get them out of their comfort zone, but keep it fun and keep it light. Because to us, like, it's, those neuroassociations, like, we want them to associate training with fun. And if we make it all, very militant, then they're not going to want to come back and do it.
What are some of the most fun drills that they kind of request during their training, if they can make requests?
Well, we train a lot of boys. We don't train too many girls. So almost all the boys love playing catch with the football. We'll do that physio ball tag where you can't pick the physio ball up off the ground, but you got to go run it over and tag them with the physio ball. They like doing that. And then sometimes we'll play red light, green light. So simple, just stupid little kid games that we played when we were kids, but I don't know how many kids are playing it these days. Dodgeball is another one, which is kind of, I don't know, 2021, the parents don't love that one so much if a kid's getting smoked in the face, but a lot of the kids love playing dodgeball.
Who doesn't? I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
And how do you get the buy-in, whether it's with the young athletes themselves or their parents? Like, what is it that you do in your approach that assures you're going to secure your clients?
So with the parents, one of the things that we did, I started doing this early on, and I actually got this from Mark Verstegen. He has he had a covenant that he would have all his athletes sign, and so I think kind of what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, about what we're really trying to get these kids to get from the training. Yes, we want to get it bigger, faster, stronger, but really what we're trying to do is get them accustomed to a program where they're dedicating themselves to it and they're committed to it. And so I think once the parents hear us talking about those types of things, you get buy-in from them right away. And I think with the kids, it's all about the group and the culture that we're creating on the floor. So if there are other kids that are like-minded or pushing and welcoming to the new athlete there, then I think right away those kids will, because you'll see it. Some kids will come in, they're super quiet, they're not talking much, and then once they get comfortable, their true personality kind of comes out, and they fall in love with the process. Now, I'd be lying to you if I told you that happens with all of the kids that come here. This is definitely not. I mean, again, we're training. We're not eating hamburgers just like the general pub. Like people sometimes don't want to work very hard, but the kids that do, once they get in here, they find out like these are my people. This is the environment I want to be in. So so I think it's the culture, and then just setting that precedent with the kid and with the parents early on.
And other sports, I mean, I'm sure you've got other athletes that are coming in there aside from baseball, but do you notice a trend in any sport right now? I'm sure it shifts from time to time. At one point, you had the McCall brothers with their extreme cycling. You had some professional surfers as well. Do you find that that's just kind of, you spin the wheel and this year we're landing on the pro surf circuit, or what's that like?
No, I mean, I don't know if this answers your question, but it's funny. We have a guy that's training here. He's married to a gal that grew up here in SoCal, and he plays for the Swiss team. He's a goalie, and he reached out to me because he was here for the holiday break, and so we'll integrate him with our baseball guys. And I have another guy named Garrett Meacham who he rides bikes like Tyler and Cam do, and he'll jump in with these guys. I have another guy that's doing lacrosse at High Point. His sister's Abby Dahlkemper, who plays for the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team. So we get this like eclectic group of, and again, we're mostly baseball heavy, but these guys jump in and they love it. And we're doing 5-10-5 shuttles, and we're doing med ball drills, and they're competing against each other, and it's fun. And so they're playing different sports, but again, to these guys, and I think what draws me to what I do is I want to figure out like what makes people tick mentally and physically, like what makes them want to be world class and how do they get there. And that's why I've had so much fun working with guys like Nat and Luke Rockhold back when he was living here, and Mitch Yaniger, like all these guys, like, yes, they're different, they play different sports, they have different personalities, but at the end of the day, like these guys just want to be the best at what they do. And a lot of what we do in strength conditioning, I'd say 80% of it is the same. There's 20% that is going to be more specific and tailored towards that individual athlete or what the specific demands of their sport are. But I love it when we have different types of athletes from different types of sports playing or competing against each other or training here in the weight room, because they'll have a common goal, and that's to be the best.
And where do you get that insight, information, or education when it comes to coaching and bringing that quality out in your athletes? Like, if for those that are seeing the video version of this podcast, there's a poster on the back of your wall there, the Pyramid of Success. I think John Wooden is in there, if I can see it properly. Yeah. Like, are you looking at his books, or where do you get your inspiration and information to be the best coach you can be?
Yeah, John Wooden was a big one for me, and still is. I was introduced to my friend when I was like 12. Used to go to his camps at UCLA, but I didn't know of him. It wasn't until I got to college. I was waiting for my wife Kendra, who her and her girlfriends are getting ready. We're going to go out to. She went to Cal Poly down in San Luis Obispo. They were getting ready, and I was just sitting, and there was like this infomercial, and John Wooden was talking, and I'm like, dude, this guy's amazing. Like I just loved. I was like on the edge of my seat. And then when we went ready to go out, I said, hey, Kendra, this is back when we used to have bookstores. I said, hey, I want to stop at a Barnes & Noble and go get this guy's book. So that was really what kind of started it for me and started my journey. So I was still playing at the time. But then, yeah, like I said, like Mark Verstegen, I listen to a ton of podcasts. I love Impact Theory is one, the guy named Tom Bilyeu. Just anything with like personal and professional development, like that stuff. I've always kind of geeked out on that stuff. And where my attention goes. So anytime I've got dead time, whether I'm driving or doing dishes or vacuums, whatever, I'll just slap a podcast in, and usually it's something along those lines of like building culture or personal development. All of that stuff really resonates with me. I like the X's and O's of what do we do, both from a baseball standpoint and from a strength and conditioning standpoint, but it's really that what we're talking about right now that grinds my gears and gets me going. And that's why, like, when you hear stuff like Nick Winkelman talking about, like, there's between internal cueing and external cueing, and devoting 4 or 5 years of his life to, getting a PhD on that topic. It's like, when you hear these people talk about these things, it's like, oh my God, like, I'm going to use this information and use it with my athletes, because it works in both sectors. It works on the strength and conditioning side as well as the baseball side. So, but yeah, I would say most of my time is spent, reading things that, John Wooden's written. I like Simon Sinek's Start With. Like, there's so many out there. I mean, there's a lot, but yeah, that's pretty much what I love most.
And what is it about coaching or cueing, more to the point, for this particular year? How has your cueing changed? And whether that's dealing with online clients or in person?
Mm-hmm. I guess, I mean, I was introduced to Nick's stuff maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So I wouldn't say that my cueing has changed much as of late. But when I was introduced to that, I was constantly, because Nick does a really good job. Like, and I feel like all of the Exos coaches do this when they present. They kind of form the problem, or kind of mention, they go really deep into the science, and then they bring in the practical side of it. And it's always really well done. So Nick had me from the beginning about it. But the one challenge I always had after listening to him, and I know he wrote a book semi-recently, I think it was like maybe a year ago. I haven't read it yet. I need to, because I think he has examples of cueing. But every time he get done talking, I was always like, okay, Nick was really good about, like, if I'm thinking about, teaching someone how to do a vertical jump, then I'm going to talk about like a rocket taking off and we're going straight up. If I'm thinking about acceleration, I'm thinking about like a fighter jet taking off. And so he would form these cues. It's like, but that in of itself is a skill set to, like, think of these cues that model the movement that you want your athlete moving in. And so again, I need to get his book so I can see kind of his cheat sheet. But when he was presenting, the argument was clear. He'd sold me for the first 5 minutes. It was like, okay, now the challenge is, how do I get that to, how do I create my own cues, external cues, to get these athletes to get it? And, the way he talks about enunciating and push and then talking to your athlete and, asking them, what did you hear me say? And then they may say something that a little bit different than what you said. And then you say, okay, great. And then now you're using their language rather than the language that I was originally using. So again, all that stuff started for me about 2 or 3 years ago. But what I found, I guess we're getting with the question, is when we started going online. So like you, we had to go online like the next day after the pandemic started. And that was really a challenge for us. And that was one of the things I was saying about. I was like, I need to be really engaged. I need to be really good about cueing these athletes. And it's hard, it's kind of hard to see them because you got a bunch of boxes on there and you're trying to kind of get it. But I'm always thinking about how can I externally cue? And I find it equally challenging both with baseball and with strength and conditioning. So yeah, but it's always fun. It's a fun challenge, right? Like, once you get the concept, it's like, okay, this is me a fun chapter. I got to figure this out. And I think that's what makes, good coaches great, is when they can do that.
Yeah, I think, one of those hidden kind of silver linings with COVID and having to go online and having several people in these video windows is that you are constantly seeing them compared to being in person, and you've got them scattered around the studio and your back may be turned from one person or another, even for a brief moment in time while you're paying attention to this person and trying to circulate around. It was so much easier in that regard, where you could see everybody at the same time, and you could connect with individuals right there and help correct it or enforce or encourage or whatever you need to do. And for me, over the past almost now year and a half, or actually it's more than a year and a half, 20 months now that we've been dealing with this, I still see people online, and the skill of observation has honed dramatically in regards to actually seeing how their body is truly moving, and not
Right.
just kind of like, oh, they're doing the exercise. No, what is that hip doing right now? And why is the head position there? And oh, that knee is actually not in the position it should be. And you start to see the subtleness that it becomes quite obvious. And
Right.
before it was hidden. I mean, that's, for me, that's one of those kind of major things. And that started occurring within the first few months of COVID, going, oh, wow, this is going to be really good for me personally, as a professionally, as a coach, as an observer, and as somebody to try and guide someone down a path that you want them to go in.
Right. I would agree. Yeah. We were definitely more locked in. I mean, the whole early on in COVID, like I was like, oh, I don't want to say excited. It was definitely scary. And I was concerned what was going to happen in my business, but in some ways I was like up for the challenge. It was like, oh, this is okay. This is gonna be a good challenge. We're gonna have to figure this out. And early on, it was like, I used Zoom, but not very much. So I didn't really know what I was doing there. And then we were using the Instagram Live, and all of these things were like great challenges. And with that, like you said, Instagram Live wasn't great because you couldn't see what anyone was doing. That's why I liked Zoom so much. So when I flipped over to Zoom, it was like I experienced all the things that you're talking about. And then over time, it got weird. It was like it just felt like they were coming on. The engagement, even though they were coming on, the engagement was down. Like they just weren't as fired up to be there as they seemed like they were early on.
Yeah.
And I think everything just went on longer than everyone expected. It just almost looked like people were just kind of going through the motions. And the Zooms got hard because there's only so many bodyweight exercises you can do, or light dumbbell type exercise you can do. And I think there was a moment there where Zach was doing most of the coaching, who's he doesn't work with us anymore, but he really helped us through the pandemic. And I think I worked out like 88 straight days. But after a while, it started to wear on me physically and mentally, emotionally. And then I was really grateful that we were able to go back, and do in-person training. But to your point, yeah, I felt like doing that for the amount of time we did make our in-person coaching better. But also it made me kind of grateful for what we had. And I think before the pandemic, we took for granted what we had. We had full classes, the energy was good. Like you just kind of take it for granted. But once it's kind of taken away from you, you're like, oh wow, we had it really good.
Yeah, and well, one of the things that you developed over the years and to quite a success are your summer camps that you put together. You invite some colleagues, former players, to come in and to put together youth sports conditioning for baseball in the form of summer camps. And of course, when COVID broke out, that all went sideways. But it seems like things are opening up again. Are you planning for a Paradigm Sports summer clinics again this coming 2022?
Yeah, we are. This will be our 11th or 12th annual, I think. I got mixed up because of COVID. I think it's gonna be our 12th. But yeah, we will do that. We're actually gonna do 2 this year. So this past year we had I think this had something to do with COVID. Normally we get around 100 kids to come attend them. This year we had over 200. So we're gonna do 2 camps. We always do it during the week of the Major League All-Star breaks. I think that's like July 16th or something like that this year. And then we'll do again another one the week of August 1st. So right before the kids go to school. I mean, 210 kids was a lot. I think that like 150 kids max would be our sweet spot. And so we're just hoping to kind of spread the crowd out a little bit. But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. We've got it's one of those things. It's one of those few things where it's like it almost kind of runs itself now because we've done it so much, and it works really well. That we serve the kids lunch. The kids all love eating the lunches. So and they get good instruction and they have a lot of fun. It's one of the more popular things we do.
And so I'm curious how it kind of goes. If you could give a general overview for maybe aspiring trainers that want to do something in their community across the nation, and they have as much passion with baseball or perhaps another sport, it's a great idea, especially getting kids to do something during the summer than to sit on their phones or to get on their Xbox or whatever the case is. How did you develop it? What's the overview of the program?
So for us, it's 5 days, Monday through Friday. The kids meet with camp starts at 9, and I'm pretty sure we end at 2. It's from 9 to 2. We serve them lunch, which a lot of people advise us against doing, and I understand why. But at the same time, like, the kids love it, and it's just been a part of the camp. That's, Kendra's wanted to be doing it. She does that still to this day, and she loves it. When the first year we did it, I think we had 30 kids, maybe a little bit less. And as I said, last year we had 210. So I think the main thing is, like, for me, it was always like, this is something I'm going to do for a long time. So even though I was a little impatient, I wanted to grow the numbers as much as I could. Be careful what you wish for, because, like I said, at 210, it was a bit hard to manage. I think for us early on, you mentioned Tom House. So the first year we had Alan Jaeger come. Alan's a throwing expert. He works with a lot of high school professional baseball players. So he came the first year. He was great. So he was kind of like a guest speaker that would come in on Wednesdays, kind of broke up the monotony of the week. And the second year was when Tom House came. And then the third year, the legendary college baseball coach, Augie Garrido, came out. And so once he came out, he's in the baseball world, he was a huge name. Huge name. He was the winningest coach in the history of college sports. It almost kind of became a distraction, and because it just took away from the camp. So after that year, I was like, we're just going to do the camp. We're not going to have a guest speaker come in. But I do believe that having those guys come the first few years did help kind of get some attention to the camp themselves. Not necessarily the younger kids, because the younger kids didn't even know who Augie Garrido was. The year he came out, we rented out the Aptos Twin Theater and played the documentary they have about him. It's called Inning by Inning. It's really good. And so we played that in the theater just to kind of give the kids an idea of who they were going to be the next day. And then after we stopped doing that, I think for us, I kind of had older kids coming. I think we went up as high as 17. And what I found out was the kids at 17 don't want to be going to camps. They want to be going to college recruiting type things. And so we kind of scaled the age back. So now it's ages 9 to 14. And I think that's kind of our sweet spot. So I would suggest to anyone wanting to do this, look at where your demographic is. Now we kind of found our sweet spot, but it took us some time to do that. And then honestly, Rock, the curriculum of what we give them is really good. Like, I feel like what we're teaching them is really good. And we have a good coaching staff. So I've been doing this long enough now where kids that played for or trained in our program or played for one of our teams, they've either gone off to college or some of them are in high school. Again, some of these kids are 9 that we're working with. So I'm okay having like a senior in high school being one of our instructors and working with these younger kids. Because we had like 23 coaches at the camp this year. And then getting crystal clear on what the objective is each day. So we have a practice plan. We review it as a staff before the camp. And we just make sure that the precedent is set early. So yeah, it's good. It's a lot of fun. And we have Mark Eichhorn come out. Mark Eichhorn, for those who don't know, pitched in the major leagues a long time ago. His son Kevin is the one who works for us. And Mark won 2 World Series. He won in 92, 93. And he is like the funniest person I've ever met. He's so good. And he's so great with kids. That's what he does for a living. He's a baseball instructor. And so a lot of the kids know him in town. And so he does a really good job of helping bring kids to the camp as well.
That's cool. Okay. So up against the clock here. For more information about Paradigm Sport, of course, you can go to paradigmsport.com, but how else can we look into you? Like Instagram, what's your handle there?
Yeah, so we have 2 now. I finally split them up because people that could do our fitness were like, why do you keep putting baseball stuff on your Instagram? So we have Paradigm Sport, at Paradigm Sport Baseball, and at Paradigm Sport on Instagram. We have a Facebook page, but I'd say we're most active on Instagram.
Right on. Joey, this has been great. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks for thinking of me.
Well, that's it for another episode of the Zealous Podcast. Thank you, Joey Wolfe, for coming on and sharing all you did with youth sports conditioning. And do tune in next week when we have another amazing guest. Follow us on Instagram, Rocky_Snyder. Subscribe to the podcast. And heck, while you're at it, why not pick up a copy of my book, Return to Center? We'll see you next week.